crack. The chalk snapped between his fingers and a smirk cut across his face like a slice through linen. Echo rolled under the crystal lights and oak rafters of Langston Hall. Across rows of lacquered desks, where donors' nameplates shone like small crowns. Brass vents breathed warm air over mahogany armrests. At the center, the professor's robe swung with expensive weight, a silk tie resting against a crisp white shirt that probably smelled like cologne and tenure. Students leaned back in their chairs, sneakers braced on chrome bars, phones half raised, the stage set for a joke. You were pushing the supply cart, wheels humming, the mop handle resting like a staff on a chariot. The bronze-sealed folder you kept in the lower tray, quiet as a coin at the bottom of a fountain, tapped once as you slowed. You had come to empty the bins before the dean's reception. Crystal glassware, cream napkins stitched with the university seal, a silver tray of macarons under a domed lid, waited at the back of the hall, like a promise for someone else. You weren't invited to that part of the building. Not really. Not the way they meant invited. He turned, chalk dust lifting in a pale cloud. Let's make this interesting, he said, voice carrying the way power learns to carry. Solve this equation. He gestured to a thicket of symbols, a field of integrals and primes. And I'll marry you. Laughter scattered like coins. Few students hooted, one coughed and another whispered, "He means you, mop guy," without looking at you, as if eye contact cost extra. Your fingertips tightened, and the blue nitrile glove squeaked against the handle. You kept moving. The university crest, twin lions flanking a torch, gleamed on a wax seal affixed to the professor's lectern. Somebody had polished it. Somebody like you. Your reflection bent in the curve of the seal, a dark smear beneath Latin words about truth and light. "You people always have opinions about our bins," he said when you didn't answer. The corner of his mouth hooked. "But what about our math?" He puffed a small cloud against the board and wrote a single line under the equation, an insult disguised as notation. On the third row of seats, a boy in an Armani bomber jacket leaned forward, elbows on knees, hungry for public sport. Phones angled. In the back, the red light on a wall camera, part of the lecture capture system, glowed. Security feeds were clear. You could feel them on your skin like an invisible sun. You tugged the cart brake and the wheels locked with a click. "Please move aside," you said, because the aisle was narrow, and the professor's robe drifted like a lazy flag into your path. He lifted it theatrically, letting the silk kiss your shoulder and then dropped it with a pat like he was dusting you off. "Let's not get testy," he said, "unless you want to take the test." A murmur skittered. The janitor jokes were old currency. They spent easily and bought cheap applause. You slid the bin liner free. Banana peel, energy drink can, printout scabbed with red ink. Errors circled like wounds. A student near the aisle whispered, "He's gonna cry," and another said, "Nah, they don't cry, they just stare." That one hurt worse than it should. Not because it was new, because it wasn't. You looked up at the board once, the way a person looks through a window to judge weather. Symbols layered like scaffolding around a cathedral, clean and arrogant. You knew the form. The core of the problem sat quiet like a sleeping animal among decorative traps. You knew where it breathed. The professor lifted the chalk between two fingers, a conductor calling for a final swell. "Tell you what," he said, grin widening. "We'll sweeten the pot. Anyone at all who can solve it." A sweep of his arm like a curtain rising earns a dinner at the chancellor's table. And perhaps he let the word linger. A conversation about funding. His eyes skipped lightly over the front row and then deliberately slid back to you. Perhaps even a better position. "We have openings in custodial leadership, I'm told." Laughter. Someone whistled, a blade of sound. You felt that old heat, the kind that smolders low, the kind your grandmother called coal fire patience. You adjusted your collared work shirt. The metal of a small platinum pin tucked under the edge where most wouldn't notice, pressed cool against your skin. You had pinned it there that morning without thinking. Habit, a reminder more than a decoration. "Bins," you said, and nodded because that was your job in this room on this schedule. You stepped around the end row, shoulders brushing the fabric of blazers, the synthetic slide of backpacks. The cart's lower tray rattled again. The bronze folder didn't move. It seemed to breathe like it had lungs. The professor scrolled his attention back to the board. "Let's proceed," he said. "We'll leave heroics to our maintenance staff." A turn of his wrist, elegant, expensive watch glinting. Engraved on the bezel, a crest perhaps, or a set of initials, flashed, then hid. The class settled into the soft clatter of pens. He continued now in performance mode, breaking the question into steps and placing wrong doors under bright lights, so the audience could enjoy watching them close. You slid a bin liner into its ring with a clean snap. Plastic whispered. You lifted the bag, knotted it, set it gently in the cart. There is a choreography to invisible work. Keep spaces dignified for people who will never learn your name. Your grandmother taught you that too. Dignity is what you bring, not what they hand you. You moved to the next aisle. A girl with peach-painted nails watched you, then looked quickly away, guilt moving like a fish under her expression. You gave her a small smile that asked nothing. The professor turned back to you. "Unless our guest would like to offer an insight," he said, eyes sparkling with that precise cruelty professors cultivate, the one that passes peer review because the punchline sounds like pedagogy. "No, nothing." Mop wisdom is famously absorbent. It wasn't creative. That made it worse. A student in row 2 raised his phone higher. He was filming vertical, thumb poised to add text later. "This is savage," he whispered. The boy in the Armani bomber jacket snorted and glanced around as if to inventory who was laughing loudest. You set the mop head into the bucket, the green handle leaning against your shoulder, and squeezed the lever down. Water sighed through the press. Pale suds lifted and popped, tiny constellations disappearing under fluorescent suns. You glanced at the equation again, and something in your chest clicked the way a door clicks when a key you thought belonged to another lock slides in and turns as if it was made for it. Your pulse settled. The noise of the room receded, replaced by the simpler sound of breathing. Yours steady, the city tucked outside the windows, a far siren like a violin complain. You placed the mop on the floor and drew a path. The line gleamed wet, then dulled to a soft sheen, like a thought cooling from bright to useful. A boy's sneaker tapped in time. The professor spoke louder, as if volume could turn wrong into right. He wrote a substitution that would only entangle the function further and underlined it twice for confidence. The chalk made that delicate squeal everyone pretends not to find unbearable. You could have kept moving. It would have been easier. Your chest already carried the geometry of 1,000 such moments, angles of entry and escape, the radius of ridicule, the exact coordinates where dignity turns and walks the other way, so you can live to work again tomorrow. But you were tired, not the kind sleep cures, the kind silence feeds. You stepped toward the board. The room reacted like wildlife when a shadow crosses. Shoulders rose, heads tilted. A ripple of whispers stitched the air. The professor's hand froze mid-sentence, chalk dust falling like snow from the paused gesture. "Sir," he said, the word knifed with polite sarcasm. "We're in the middle of—" "May I clear a corner?" you asked. Your voice was even. Years of carrying other people's secrets had trained it so. You pointed with your eyes to the lower right quadrant, where he'd left margin, as if to dare anyone to use it. He set his palm on the ledge and laughed, slow and bored. "By all means," he said, "demonstrate the custodial approach." Someone near the back muttered, "This is going to be good." In the ceiling, the lecture cam's little red eye brightened, capturing the angle where you stood under a downlight that caught chalk dust like galaxies. 2 students in the second row pushed notebooks aside and held their phones chest high. A reporter from the campus paper, press badge dangling, suit too big, slid into the doorway, sensing blood. You did not touch the chalk yet. You pulled a folded microfiber cloth from your pocket, habit, and wiped a small rectangle clear where ghost formulas had smudged last week's theorem. Cleanliness is clarity. You looked at the board, then at him. The equation's heartbeat once under the white, simple, elegant human, not the beast he'd made of it. He rolled the chalk toward you with his index finger. The small cylinder stopped exactly at the edge of your cleared square, as if refusing to cross into your space. "The floor's all yours," he said. His audience chuckled at the double meaning. If he'd noticed the platinum glint just under your collar when you leaned, he didn't show it. You picked up the chalk. The texture was dry and familiar, like the feel of old books, like the feel of your grandfather's hands when he taught you numbers at a wobbly kitchen table where the laminate peeled at the corners. You remembered his voice, soft Mississippi honey. "Don't raise your hand, baby." Raise your evidence. You breathed out, wrote one line, not a flourish, not a performance, just the key. An unobvious substitution masked by the professor's wrong path, a turn that flattened the terrain. The board seemed to exhale. A pocket of laughter died like a candle someone cupped. You wrote a second line. The room leaned in. The reporter's pen stopped scratching. The boy in Armani forgot to look at himself in the phone screen and watched you instead. The professor's grin stuck in the half-smile of a statue that just realized it was clay. Coincidence, he said too quickly. A lucky simplification. His tone changed at the edges, a hairline crack that only trained ears hear. He moved toward the board, blocking the camera for a second, then stepped aside when a few students hissed, "We can't see." You paused. Not for drama, for balance. You placed the chalk down gently, parallel to the ledge as if returning a tool to a velvet tray. Then you adjusted the cart's brake with your heel. The bronze-sealed folder in the lower tray gleamed for an instant when the downlight found it. The wax impression, a discreet emblem not often seen outside certain rooms, winked and went still. Nobody noticed. Not yet. The professor tapped the board twice with his nail, buying time. Even if, he said, even if that step is valid, where? Would you go next? You looked at him and then at the space you had cleared. Forward, you said. Not loud, just true. He opened his mouth, closed it. A laugh somewhere tried to start and faltered. Phones were fully raised now, lenses like tiny moons. The security feed drew a sharp rectangle around your face as the autofocus found you. In the upper corner of the hall, the red light held steady, recording every breath, every blink. You picked up the chalk again. But what came next silenced the room. The silence didn't last. A nervous giggle leaked from somewhere near the back. And suddenly the whole hall breathed again. Louder, faster, like a creature waking up. The professor clapped once, sharp. Enough entertainment, he said. Class dismissed. His robe flared as he turned, chalk dust trailing him like smoke. Students rose in a shuffle of chairs and chatter. That janitor was wild, someone said. Thought he'd impress her. Nah. Another laughed. He just drew squiggles. Phones glowed, clips were already flying through group chats before you'd reached the door. You pushed the cart into the corridor where the marble smelled of polish and power. A faint echo of laughter chased you down the hall. You'd heard worse. On docks and diners and graduate lounges where people didn't notice the custodian reading the same journals they skimmed. Still, this one stuck. It wasn't the joke. It was the equation. You knew exactly what it was hiding. In the service closet, fluorescent hum and detergent scent wrapped the world in smallness. You sat on an overturned bucket, pulled a worn notebook from your back pocket. Pages filled with numbers, margins tattooed with notes from a life paused. A scholarship lost. A mother's hospital bill paid instead. The janitor job was meant to be temporary. 5 years later, you were still sweeping brilliance off the floor. You flipped to a blank page and rewrote the symbols from memory. Chalk, now pencil. Arrogance, now quiet focus. The pattern bloomed. What he'd dismissed as a joke was a theorem half-built, the kind that could open grants, patents, headlines. You felt that slow burn of purpose, steady and exact. Soft strings fade in outside, laughter faded into campus noise. Inside, pencil whispered across paper. You traced the missing logic, the bridge no one else had seen. The answer wasn't hard. It was patient. When the equation balanced, you smiled. Small, private, the kind that holds no bitterness, only certainty. You closed the notebook, slid it beside the bronze-sealed folder on your cart, and checked your watch. Cheap plastic, but set 5 minutes fast. Time to finish the shift. As you wheeled the cart back toward Langston Hall, the corridor mirrors caught your reflection beside the university crest. Lion and torch. Beneath it, the motto read, Veritas et Lux, truth and light. You whispered, almost amused, we'll see how bright tomorrow gets. The hallway lights dimmed on sensors as you passed, leaving a trail of fading illumination like a countdown. Somewhere behind a locked door, a printer spat out a fresh roster for next week's guest lecturers. One name, recently added, sat at the bottom, yours. But no one knew that yet. The next morning, Langston Hall looked different in the hush before classes. Floors gleamed, chairs aligned, sunlight slid across the chalkboard in gold slants that softened every cruel echo. You moved between rows with your cart, setting bins straight, checking the mop handle like a conductor checking his baton. No audience, now just the faint buzz of the projector and your own breath. The professor's equation still ghosted across the board, half erased but not gone. You studied it as though it were a mirror. The flaw still pulsed there, a heartbeat beneath dust. You lifted the cloth, wiped away the upper corner, and rewrote the clean version from your notebook. Symbols flowed, quiet and sure. The chalk rasped softly, almost tender. Behind you, a door hinge sighed. A student, backpack hanging open, coffee steaming, froze. Sir? You're not supposed to." You turned, smiling, just tidying the math. He blinked, unsure if that was a joke. You know what that is? Do you?" You asked. He didn't answer. The door clicked again as he slipped out, already texting someone. Minutes later, voices gathered outside. A few curious students, then a cluster. Phones appeared in doorways like eyes. The professor wasn't due for another 20 minutes, but gossip outruns schedules. You kept writing. Each line revealed the next, clean as breath on glass. The chalk broke once. You replaced it without looking down. Someone whispered, "He's actually doing it." Another, "No way." You didn't speak. Numbers spoke better. Each mark drew oxygen from the room. The laughter that had once filled it now seemed a memory from another planet. The board filled, symmetry, building until it looked less like math and more like music frozen in symbols. When the final term fell into place, you underlined it once. A ripple moved through the crowd, half awe, half disbelief. The same student from before whispered, "That's right, isn't it?" You capped the chalk, rested it on the ledge. "It's balanced," you said. Truth usually is. The professor entered then, brisk steps, robe swinging. The door banged open, the sound of authority. "What's this circus?" he demanded. His eyes found the board, found you, and then the audience he hadn't invited. His jaw tightened. "Step away." You did, slowly, hands open, nothing defensive, just clarity. "I left your hall cleaner than I found it," you said. He stared at the equation, lips moving silently as he traced each line. His skin paled a shade, a tiny betrayal of certainty. "Who told you? Where did you learn?" You met his eyes. "Maintenance teaches pattern recognition. You see enough mess, you learn what order looks like." He wanted to laugh again, but the sound wouldn't come. The crowd had already judged. Phones were high, faces serious. The red recording light blinked steady from the ceiling. You took up the card handle. The bronze folder caught the morning sun, flashing once like a secret signaling readiness. "I'll leave you to your class," you said, voice even. "You've got plenty to clean up." You pushed through the door. Behind you, whispers rose, not mocking now but wondering. Somewhere in the hall, a single pair of hands began to clap, hesitant then sure. It followed you down the corridor like a new kind of echo. By midday, the campus had a heartbeat of whispers. Every corridor carried a version of the story. A janitor, an impossible equation. A professor gone silent. Some said it was luck, others said trickery. But anyone who'd seen the board remembered the precision, the calm, the way every symbol looked like it had been waiting for your hand. You stayed quiet. You had a shift to finish, trash bins to collect, hallways to mop. But even that felt different now. Students nodded when you passed. One of them even held the door. Little gestures, small ripples in the same place that once felt like stone. The professor didn't appear for his next class. His assistant came instead, red-eyed, mumbling something about a private meeting. But the hall's camera feed had already been reviewed. The footage of you writing spread faster than rumor, shared in dorms, reposted by alumni, clipped into 30-second miracles captioned, "The janitor who solved it." You didn't know any of that yet. You were in the faculty wing, cleaning brass plaques that reflected the world upside down. When the dean's secretary found you, she looked nervous. "He wants to see you," she said. "Who?" "The dean. Now." You followed her through a door lined with velvet rope and portraits of men who never had to clean their own offices. The dean waited behind a desk that looked older than the building. Beside him, the professor stood rigid, face pale, a tremor hiding in his jaw. "Have a seat," the dean said. You stayed standing. The professor spoke first, brittle and clipped. "There's been some misunderstanding. This gentleman was cleaning the hall. I perhaps encouraged a bit of theatrics." The dean's eyes shifted from him to you. "Is that true?" You thought for a moment, then said, "I cleaned the hall." And the equation, a small sound, something like a smothered laugh, escaped one of the secretaries behind you. The dean coughed to hide his smile. "Your work has caused quite a stir," he said. "The mathematics board inquired this morning. They believe your solution matches a proof submitted last year under review. The handwriting remarkably similar. You didn't look at the professor. You looked at the edge of the desk where the wood grain curved like a spiral, endless and self-contained. "It would be," you said. "It's mine." Silence held the room for a long moment. The professor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Impossible," he muttered. "You don't even have credentials." The dean cut him off gently. "We checked. A doctorate from Howard, physics minor in applied mathematics. Patent filed under your name 2 years ago for pattern recognition algorithms." His tone softened. "May I ask why you're here?" You hesitated. "Bills, family, and because cleaning is honest work." The dean nodded slowly, a flicker of respect behind his glasses. The professor looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. "This doesn't change the boundaries of professionalism," he said, voice rising. He breached decorum. "This changes everything," the dean interrupted quietly. "Effective immediately, you're on leave, until we sort this." He turned to you. "And you, Mr. Williams, isn't it? You'll receive formal communication soon." You nodded once. "I'll finish my shift." The dean smiled faintly. "Of course you will." You walked out past the secretary, who offered a quiet "sir" as you passed. The word carried no sarcasm this time. Outside, the hallway smelled of lemon polish and second chances. You pushed your cart, wheels humming steady, heart calm. In the reflection of a glass case, your platinum pin caught the light. A small, constant reminder that truth doesn't need a stage, only time. Tomorrow the cameras would replay your silence for the world, and numbers, as always, wouldn't lie. By the next morning, the university had lost control of the story. News vans lined the campus gates and reporters swarmed students between classes. Headlines read like fiction. Janitor outsmarts professor in live lecture. Clips looped online. Chalk moving, a man in gray overalls writing calm as prayer while a room watched history reverse itself. You arrived before sunrise, hoping to finish your rounds unnoticed, but the security guard at the east door stopped you. "They're asking for you," he said, half amazed, half apologetic. "Dean wants you upstairs." You nodded, set the mop aside, and followed the marble corridor to the administrative wing. Cameras flashed as you entered. A half-dozen journalists craned for a shot. The professor sat at the far end of the room, face drawn, his posture collapsing in slow motion. Beside him, the dean gestured to a chair. "Didn't take it?" "Mr. Williams," the dean said, "the National Mathematics Council has verified the equation. Your proof was published under peer review years ago, but under a pseudonym. Would you like to explain?" You met his eyes. "I used to teach. Lost my post when funding cuts came through. Thought I'd return when things balanced out." You smiled a little. "Life didn't balance, so I worked here instead." The room went still. Even the cameras quieted for a heartbeat. The professor shifted, voice low and raw. You let us believe." "I didn't let you believe anything," you said. "You assumed." He flinched. The dean exhaled softly. "The university board convened early. They've offered you reinstatement and a guest lecture slot." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. "And a formal apology." You didn't open it. You looked instead at the professor's hands, folded tight, knuckles white. "No need for that," you said. "Respect isn't in paper. It's in how people listen." A murmur swept through the journalists. Someone whispered. He turned it down. You didn't correct them. You weren't turning down a job. You were choosing the peace that comes after proving a point. Still, you reached into the bronze folder and withdrew a single document. The wax seal cracked neatly. "One last thing," you said. "Your department used part of this theorem in a grant proposal. I wrote that proposal 5 years ago. I'd like it properly credited." The dean's eyebrows rose. "You have proof?" You smiled faintly. Numbers don't lie. He read the document, scanned the signatures, then nodded once. We'll correct it. He turned toward the professor, whose face had gone blank. You may wish to start drafting a resignation letter. The meeting ended with polite phrases and too many cameras. Outside, sunlight burned through morning haze. Students gathered at the steps, some cheering, some just staring. One girl held up her phone. Sir, she asked, what do you feel right now? You paused on the landing. Balanced, you said. It's a good equation. Applause broke like rain. It followed you down the steps, not loud, not wild, steady. The kind of sound that means something has finally been understood. You didn't wave. You just walked, leaving behind the hall where a joke had turned into a lesson. In the courtyard, a light breeze lifted chalk dust from your sleeve. It shimmered briefly in the sun before disappearing. You looked up at the carved motto over the main doors, Truth and Light. For the first time, it didn't sound like irony. The security guard at the gate nodded as you passed. They'll be talking about that class for years, he said. Then it was worth cleaning, you answered. By the end of the week, Langston Hall had turned into a shrine. The once proud portraits along the stairwell now looked down on whispers and flashes. Students paused before class, touching the frame of the chalkboard where your equation still stood sealed behind glass. They'd covered the lower edge with small notes. Thank yous, quotes, sketches of mops and chalk sticks drawn like trophies. You hadn't gone back. You were working nights in another building now, quieter, fewer eyes. It was easier to think there, but the world outside kept circling. News channels replayed the video. Universities sent letters. Old colleagues reached out. The clip of you solving the problem had gathered millions of views and 100 interpretations. Genius in disguise, social experiment, justice in real time. The only person who hadn't said a word was the professor. Until that morning, you arrived to find the dean waiting near the faculty lounge. His expression was tight, uncertain. He resigned, he said without ceremony. Effective immediately. There's a statement. He handed you the folded sheet. It was short, 2 paragraphs of apology, one of self-defense, and a final line that read, Some lessons come too late. You folded it once and handed it back. Then he finally learned something, you said. The dean hesitated. The board also approved your research reinstatement. You can teach if you wish. You looked around at the building, the marble, the echo, the plaques. Maybe later, you said. Some equations need time to settle. He nodded, almost relieved, and walked away. Outside, reporters clustered beyond the gates, shouting questions. You didn't stop. A few recognized you and aimed their microphones. Will you forgive him? Someone asked. You smiled without slowing. Already did. Forgiveness is lighter to carry. Past the campus boundary, the noise thinned into city hum. You stepped into a small cafe where no one cared who you were. The waitress poured coffee without comment. You sat by the window, watching students hurry under trees, backpacks swaying. For the first time in years, you let stillness happen. You took out your notebook. Inside, the theorem's proof sat neat and complete. On the opposite page, in careful handwriting, you wrote one sentence. Dignity solves everything it touches. Your phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you. You didn't need to ask who it was. Some debts repay themselves quietly. That evening, you returned the bronze folder to your locker. The seal had cracked from use, but the emblem still gleamed. You ran your thumb over it once, then shut the door. Tomorrow, another hall would need cleaning. Another set of footprints would mark the floor. That was fine. Work is still work. Respect doesn't live in titles. It lives in the way you carry your tools. You left the building just as the sky broke into color. Sunset scattering pink over the stone towers. A student passed by and stopped. Sir, she said, awkward but sincere. My brother saw your video. He started applying to colleges again. You nodded. Tell him to keep studying. Equations don't care who solves them. As she left, a gust lifted a scrap of chalk dust from your sleeve. It drifted into the air, disappearing into the glow. Back inside Langston Hall, the janitor's cart sat against the wall, empty. The floor beneath it reflecting the ceiling lights like a still lake. The laughter that once echoed there would never quite sound the same again. A week later, campus life had quieted, but the story hadn't died. It had simply become part of the walls, something spoken in low voices by students who hadn't even been there. Professors cited it in lectures about ethics, ambition, grace. The board named the lecture hall after you. A small plaque under the mounted chalkboard read, to the one who reminded us what learning means. You didn't attend the ceremony. Instead, you watched from the end of the corridor, while maintenance staff buffed the new tile. One of them, a young man with tired eyes, caught your reflection in the glass and smiled shyly. You nodded back, wordless, recognizing the shared language of people who keep spaces shining for others. The dean approached, hands clasped behind his back. "They'd like you to speak," he said. "I already did," you answered. "The board's still there." He chuckled softly. "You could inspire them." "They don't need another speech," you said. "They need to listen better." He looked down, thoughtful. "And the professor?" You exhaled. "I wish him peace. Pride's a heavier mop than mine." That made the dean smile, sad, grateful, maybe both. He left you there in the quiet hum of fluorescent light. You walked once more into the hall. The chalkboard gleamed behind glass. The formula glowed faintly under the overhead lamp. You could almost hear your grandfather's voice again. "Raise your evidence." You'd done that, and the world had listened. You pressed your palm to the glass. The equation didn't need changing. Truth never does. But you still saw the tiny smear of chalk under the lower line. A flaw no one else would notice. You left it there. It made the perfection human. Outside, evening descended. The campus bells tolled 6 times, sound stretching through the empty quads. You followed the path to the maintenance shed, unlocked the door, and hung your uniform on the hook. The platinum pin gleamed once before you slipped it into your pocket. You stepped back into the twilight, just another man walking home after work. No cameras now, no whispers. Only the slow, steady rhythm of your shoes on stone. Somewhere behind you, a student paused in front of the plaque and read the inscription aloud. His friend said, "I heard he was a genius." The first one replied, "No, just a man who didn't stop." That was enough. The air smelled of rain and chalk. You looked up, breathed it in, and smiled. A quiet, unhurried kind of victory. Some lessons cost pride. For him, it cost everything. Power has faces they never expect. Subscribe, because truth always finds its voice.